are free to join the discussion, everyone. Welcome, everyone, to iCritic Live. I'm your host, Kevin, and welcome to another what I hope will be a great show. And I don't know if you can actually see it. I'm going to try, but I know that it doesn't do. I found this at Disneyland a couple weeks ago. This Oswald the Lucky Rabbit lamp. It's not really looking too good, unfortunately, but this thing was just so cute that I had to get it. It looks super great on the desk, and so I just love that Oswald is a thing in the Disney theme parks again, and with Disney in general. So just want to show that, even that didn't quite work out. So anyway, folks, we have a big show today. This is an episode that kind of came up at the last minute, if you will. I was planning to discuss The Little Mermaid, although we might still do that. But I've been having a discussion with a few people on Twitter about Disney CEOs. And the discussion has largely been whether or not Bob Iger is the worst CEO in Disney history. And, you hear terms like that thrown around a lot, like Bob Iger is one of the best CEOs of Disney, and Bob Iger is one of the worst CEOs of Disney. And there's a couple of things that people have to kind of keep in mind. First of all the CEOs for any company has their pros and their cons. Some are better at their job than others. Some are worse at their jobs than others. You have to kind of look at the big picture. And sometimes when you step back and you look at the big picture, sometimes things can reveal themselves to be a little bit more complicated than you had originally thought. One second, folks. My wife is texting me, and this is really important. So anyway, sorry. When you're married, you got to stop what you're doing to talk to the wife. So anyway, you got to look at the big picture. You got to see what they're doing overall, the overall good that they did for the company, the overall harm that they did to the company. There are sometimes different things that you prioritize, like some people prioritize whether or not the company was successful or not. Some people prioritize what they want to see from the company, and so forth. And I decided I think it would be fun to just do this topic and kind of really look at all the CEOs and what their accomplishments were, what they did right for the company, what they did wrong for the company. And the other thing I have to keep in mind is that there's only 6 Disney CEOs in history. It's not like there was like a dozen to choose from. So sometimes it's like, oh, this is going to be one of the worst. It's like, it's a very, very small field which to actually get your basis on. So even some of the best CEOs, like I'm going to tell you right now, the second and the third best CEOs had some major problems as CEOs. And I guess if there's going to be a third thing that I'm going to mention, when I am basing this list on things, I am not going to look at a singular event and say, that one thing is the reason they are the absolute worst CEO in history. No, I am not going to do that. You should not do that either, in my opinion. In these discussions I was having with these 3 to 5 people, some people said that they did not like a certain CEO because they did this one thing. And when you bring up a lot of these other things that they did that were really good, things that those people probably liked, it's like, well, they did for this reason. They did for this reason. And besides, they did this, so I don't like it. It's like, I am not a single issue arbiter. I am not a single issue judge. I am not a single issue voter. That's why it's kind of hard for me at the elections, because if I was a single issue voter, it would be easy to pick a side. Okay, this is the one issue I agree with. Whoever says they're for that issue, that's who I'm voting for. But nope, I can't do that. I have to kind of look at the whole picture, and we are going to do that too. So it's been 5 minutes. And by the way, feel free to share your opinions on these CEOs, and we will, discuss some of those counterpoints as well, because I think that this could be a very fun discussion. So anyway, without further ado, let's start with the best CEO and go to the worst. I always like to start with the good as opposed to the bad. And Disney's best CEO, unsurprisingly, comes from someone who had Disney in their name, And that person is Roy O. Disney. Let me, now some of you might be scratching your heads a little confused right now, because shouldn't there be another Disney at the top of the list? Maybe someone whose name begins with W and ends with Alt? Well, I know what you're thinking, but here's the thing. Walt Disney was never a CEO. Kind of. Just remember what number you're on. I'll remind you what number, but we're doing it by rank. Walt Disney was a founder, a creator, and a producer, but Walt himself did not run the day-to-day operations of Walt Disney Studios. His brother Roy did that, and his company, his brother Roy, was named the official first CEO of the Disney company. Oh, thank you, Baba Scott. I really appreciate that. And I think it's pretty obvious why Roy Disney is the best CEO this company has ever had. And it's not because his name is Disney and he was Walt's brother. The reason Roy was the best CEO is because he basically was the money man. Like if you watch any Disney documentary, you'll read any Disney book, Roy was the money man. Walt would come up with an idea. I want to make an animated short with sound, which was Steamboat Willie. Roy figured out a way to pay for that. I want to make the first full-length animated motion picture, Snow White. Walt came with the idea. Roy has to figure out how to finance that. I want to build a theme park that emphasizes in storytelling and for families to come together and play. Guess what? Roy had to find a way to fund that. And when Walt died and Epcot was not finished, then Roy Disney was the one to get it finished. Yes, we're starting off from the best and working our way to the worst. So for that reason, Roy is the best Disney CEO. Now, here's the thing. He himself did not make a lot of personal decisions. He was not involved too terribly with creating stuff in the company. But he definitely found roundabout ways to make the Disney company stronger and bigger. And he laid the foundations for how the Disney company could survive. For example, when Walt wanted to make Fantasia, Roy did find a way to fund it, but guess what? RKO Pictures did not want to distribute it because they felt they would not make any money from it. So what did Roy do? He created the Buena Vista distribution label, and that's why Buena Vista is a thing. And he did this for many, many projects. Roy was the one who got things up and running. And when Walt passed, he ran the ship for a little while longer until his death. And so for that purpose, I believe Roy Disney is the best CEO. He basically built this company. He entertained all of his little brother's crazy ideas, however insane they sounded at the time, and he made them come true. And he also, by the way, gave some sound advice. Roy was the one who realized that during World War II, when they were cut off from international markets and they didn't have the funds to make a lot of new movies, hey, it's been about 10 years since Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs was released in theaters. There's a whole new generation who's never seen it. Let's re-release it. And he got that whole 10-year ball rolling. And the Disney Vault, as much as we dislike it, has definitely been the backbone of the Disney company for many, many years. So basically, every major playbook that Disney goes by today got started by Roy Disney, and that's why he's the best. Now then, that's a tough fact to follow, and here's the thing. Even though we're going to go to the second best, this person does have a lot of controversies, did a lot of things wrong, so I guess it's only fair to say that it's all going to be downhill from here, and guess what? There is no such thing as a perfect CEO. But that being said, the Disney's second best CEO was Michael Eisner. Now, here's the thing. Michael Eisner is still a very controversial figure within the Disney community, especially if you are a fan of the theme parks, because Michael Eisner did like to do things on the cheap. He was a penny pincher, and Disney lost out on a lot of really good things and a lot of good opportunities as a result of Michael Eisner's penny pinching ways. And it is under his leadership that the Disney theme parks lost some of their luster. So look, again, we have to acknowledge a lot of these men and these CEOs, they all have issues. But here's what Michael Eisner did do for the company that definitely requires, or at least evokes, a lot of respect. First of all, he took over the company when it was in the verge of being potentially bought out and sold for parts. The animation division was terrible. The live action division was not producing anything of noteworthiness. Disney had become strapped because all they could make were kids' films or family films, while other studios could make family and adult films. And Disney was just in a really bad place. I mean, the theme parks were... It's funny because even though the theme parks were in a bad state and he helped make them better, he also made them worse at the end. I acknowledge that. So what did he do? Well, first of all, he made it so that Disney could make adult movies and compete in that landscape. So he helped, well, actually, no, I think another person founded the Touchstone Pictures label. So I'll have to give credit, but he really took advantage of Touchstone Pictures. He partnered with Miramax, which brought Disney to Oscar glory several times. He did find a way to make the theme parks profitable, and he greenlit some of the theme park's most iconic rides, including Splash Mountain, which I have had many, many heated debates with people on Twitter about, but I'm making another video about Splash Mountain, so we can talk about that later. He also, along with Jeffrey Katzenberg and Frank Wells, oversaw the Disney Renaissance. Now, it is true that when he came on, the animation studio was moved to a parking lot. Basically, Disney Animation had not produced a hit for a long time. They needed that space for Hollywood talent and things like that. And so that didn't start out the best way. But under the leadership of Eisner, Katzenberg, and Wells, Disney made The Great Mouse Detective, The Little Mermaid, The Rescuers Down Under, which was one of their few flops. And then, of course, they had Beauty and the Beast. And they had Aladdin. And they had The Lion King and Hunchback of Notre Dame and Pocahontas and Hercules and Tarzan. Fantasia 2000, The Emperor's New Groove. This is all under Eisner's tenure. Not only that, Eisner even allowed some animation to be produced under the Touchstone Pictures banner, like The Nightmare Before Christmas and James and the Giant Peach, so that Disney could experiment more with adult animation. Under Eisner, Disney expanded by launching Toon Disney. They acquired the Studio Ghibli movie collection. They purchased the Anaheim Angels. They founded the Mighty Ducks sports team. They founded Hollywood Records and Radio Disney. You know, there was a lot of growth and expansion. Under Eisner, there was California Adventure that launched. Now, it launched in a very terrible state, but Michael Eisner did bring the second theme park to California. Also expanded Walt Disney World, and of course opened Euro Disney. Now, Euro Disney opened in very rough shape, but, well, it eventually got better, and that ended up being a really good deal for everyone. And, of course, under Eisner, Disney brought some of their shows to Broadway. Under Eisner, we got Beauty and the Beast, the Tony Award-winning The Lion King, which if you have not seen The Lion King on Broadway, The Lion King is one of the greatest Broadway shows ever made. Alongside Phantom of the Opera, it is one of the quintessential Broadway productions to see. And of course, Eisner made a deal with Pixar, bringing us Toy Story, Finding Nemo, A Bug's Life, The Incredibles. I mean, these are all things that Michael Eisner did, and I think we forget about that. Now, some of the bad things about Michael Eisner were, well, he liked to be cheap. There were many movies that Disney did not make because Michael Eisner, frankly, didn't want to spend money on them. Not the least of which is, at one point, Disney could have made The Lord of the Rings. Didn't want to spend the money on it. That ended up not being a good idea. And just to let you know, yes, that we're talking about the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings. We're not talking about any other version of Lord of the Rings. This was the Peter Jackson trilogy that eventually made it into theaters, won all those Academy Awards, became one of the most famous trilogies of all time. Disney could have owned that. As a result, they made the Chronicles of Narnia movies, and while I think the first one did pretty well, they canceled the series once the second one underperformed a little bit, and the third one was made by Fox, and now I guess the thing is being rebooted by Netflix or something like that. Eisner decided to shut down 2D animation just because movies like Atlantis and Brother Bear were losing the box office wars to Finding Nemo and Shrek. Even though I can tell you right now, the reason those 2D films were losing money wasn't because they weren't computer animated. It was because Shrek and Finding Nemo were much better movies. Lilo and Stitch, which was 2D animated, made pretty good box office because it was a good movie and the people told their friends to go see it. And of course, there was that whole Save Disney thing where Eisner wanted to eject Roy E. Disney, son of Roy O. Disney, from the company, and they were disagreeing with where the company was going. And Eisner seemed to have like a little bit of an ego trip near the end of his tenure. Like, he just thought he was hot stuff, and he botched the whole thing with Michael Ovitz, and the board was extremely loyal to him to a fault where, you know, shareholder value went down for a little while. Projects were failing. So Eisner did have some issues. There's a reason he effectively resigned. But again, Eisner saved Disney from bankruptcy. He oversaw the Disney Renaissance, built new theme parks, made the initial partnership with Pixar. These are very, very impressive things to have on your resume as a CEO. And now we're going to go to the third best Disney CEO. And this is going to be like the last good CEO, in my opinion. After this, it's all kind of diminishing returns. And the third best CEO is Bob Iger. Now, Bob Iger has a lot of problems, I'll admit. He has made the company very IP focused. This is true. He has prioritized Marvel and Star Wars to almost everything else. This is true. He created Disney Plus and basically has not, well, at least whatever team he has put in place, I should say, have not done a great job at putting vintage Disney stuff on the platform. I acknowledge that. Here's the thing, though. Bob Iger, when you look at his accomplishments, his good accomplishments far outweigh his bad accomplishments. When he became CEO, the way you'll notice a theme here, Disney goes between good periods and bad periods. It's not all one person's fault, but it happens. One of the first things he did was he repaired the relationship with Pixar and ended up acquiring Pixar. When he acquired Pixar, that meant John Lasseter became a producer for Disney feature animation as well as Pixar feature animation. And people forget, for several years, there was like so much classic animation that was being released. We're talking Tangled, Inside Out, Toy Story 3, Frozen, Zootopia, Coco. I mean, these are all great movies. Oh, The Princess and the Frog. Because of Bob Iger, 2D animation came back. Now, it's kind of on ice again while the 2D animators work on theme park stuff and things like that. But guess what? Apparently, they're making another 2D animated film, and Bob Iger, in his second tenure, is apparently spearheading that. So that's a good thing. Bob Iger also knew that the Disney theme parks had been suffering because Michael Eisner had stopped updating them. He had stopped innovating. And as a result, the parks were starting to fall apart. Iger recommitted Disney to the theme parks and even spent $8 billion, more than what it cost to make California Adventure, to refurbish California Adventure. Disney California Adventure went from being a joke to where you got to ride such classic rides like Hollywood All-Stars Chaser, whatever the heck that thing was. And, you know, the tortilla bread walkthrough. And for some reason, Whoopi Goldberg was a huge part of California Adventure when it opened. He made it where you could, well, Tower of Terror and Monsters Incorporated and the Muppets came back. And now we have the Little Mermaid and the Midway Mania. I mean, Bob Iger really saved California Adventure from being just a dump of a theme park. And under Iger, of course, he bought Marvel. He bought Star Wars. I know some people don't like these things or they think there's too much of them. But here's the thing. These properties did help make Disney a lot of money, and it helped them to expand quite a bit. So Bob Iger did. Oh, and also one of the biggest things that Bob Iger did that I thought was like classic, he brought Oswald the Lucky Rabbit home to the Disney family. He brought Oswald home, which was Walt Disney's first creation. Now, there's some debate about why he did this. Some say it was because they wanted to make the Epic Mickey game. Some said it's because Diana Disney or Diane Disney asked him to. It really doesn't matter what the real reason was. The point is he did it, and it's not like he had a lot to gain by bringing Oswald home to the Disney company. And what's even more impressive is that even though he brought him home, he hasn't really updated the character. Oswald is one of the few currently active Disney characters that remains old school. Another thing that Iger is doing that I don't think some people even appreciate really is that Iger has reinvested in Mickey Mouse in ways that Michael Eisner never did. I mean, under Michael Eisner, Mickey Mouse was a symbol, a company logo, if you will. And they really didn't do much with the character. They said, oh, we're going to remake Mickey shorts again. They made a few. They made the Christmas Carol and the Prince and the Potter. And then they made Runaway Brain and then basically buried it forever. But for the most part, Mickey didn't really do much other than show up at corporate events and commercials. Iger actually greenlit a Mickey Mouse ride at Disneyland, like not even a bad one. Like it's a genuinely good Mickey Mouse ride. Excuse me. And he put Mickey Mouse back on TV. He agreed to the Kingdom Hearts collaboration with Square Enix. And these are all great things. I mean, do you know that there have been more Mickey Mouse cartoons produced in the last 5 years than there were under the entirety of Michael Eisner's reign at Disney? Like, for those who say that Iger does not pay attention to legacy Disney anything, that's just simply not true. Iger has been hard at work making Mickey Mouse viable again. He does do things. He honestly has done a lot more with the Muppets than Eisner ever did. We got a couple theatrical Muppet films. We have the Muppet Babies reboot. We had the Primetime Muppet series. Like, I mean, if you're a Muppets fan under Iger's tenure, a lot of Muppet content got produced and is still being produced. That Mayhem series on Disney Plus is awesome. It is really, really awesome. So I think Iger is actually woefully undervalued by hardcore Disney fans. Now, it should be noted that there are a few things that did happen under Iger's watch that, is not appreciative by Disney fans. Some will say that he kept Song of the South in the vault. In all fairness, Michael Eisner kept Song of the South in the vault. I don't think we're ever going to get Disney actually release that movie. We're going to have to wait for that to become public domain. But under Iger, Zippity Doodah basically became this problematic song, which I don't agree with. And Splash Mountain will be rethemed, which personally I'm not as objected to that because I think those animatronics at Splash Mountain really were outdated and needed to be updated. If they want to retheme it, fine. I think there's a lot of potential there. And it's not like the track is going to be any different. But it should be noted there's a lot of fans of Splash Mountain. And that was not a popular opinion. Now, I'm also going to bring this up because some friends of mine, this is their big sticking point. Bob Iger let go of a studio executive called Dick Cook. And Dick Cook was one of the big people who kept the Disney legacy stuff alive, including the Walt Disney Treasures DVD series, which is a series I love. I made multiple videos about that. But Iger let him go, and that brought the end to some of these legacy projects. My opinion of that is I do not like that Dick Cook was let go, but that is nowhere near a breaking point for me. And partially because, honestly, I had some issues with Dick Cook myself. I did not like how under Dick Cook, the Studio Ghibli catalog, which are masterful works of art, basically were buried by Disney. Like, Dick Cook would literally bury these movies on DVD. They barely put them out into theaters. They wouldn't sell them at the Disney store. I remember when Spirited Away and Lilo and Stitch were nominated for Academy Awards for Best Animated Feature. Dick Cook pushed for Lilo and Stitch to win. And people would occasionally ask him about Spirited Away. And he's like, hey, look, if Spirited Away wins, we will delay the theatrical release by a month or so to give people a chance to see it in theaters. Well, Spirited Away won. And then when Dick Cook was asked about it, he's like, no, it's going out on DVD as scheduled. It'll be out in 2 days. And that was crummy. Like, as someone who's a big Ghibli fan, like, that was a scumbag thing to do. Now, someone did tell me, like, well, anyone could distribute Studio Ghibli. No, they couldn't. Whoever owned the distribution rights could distribute Studio Ghibli. Disney at the time owned the Studio Ghibli rights to distribute in America. And they basically did nothing with it. Nothing. And that was by Dick Cook's choice. So no, I don't think Dick Cook was necessarily a saint. He did a lot of good things, though. He defended Johnny Depp when they wanted to recast him in Pirates of the Caribbean. And, of course, the Walt Disney Treasures series. But the thing is, when a new CEO comes in, executive changes are common. You can't take this stuff personally. So I don't think that decision makes Iger the worst CEO ever. In fact, there's 3 that are considerably worse. So the top 3 of the Disney CEOs were Roy O. Disney, Michael Eisner, and Bob Iger. After that, though, we basically have diminishing returns to the point where we might not even be discussing these ones nearly as much. But the 3rd worst Disney CEO is Card Walker. Card Walker basically became the CEO basically after Roy Disney died. And he was the co-CEO with Don Tatum. So he only was the CEO for 3 years. He decided he was the first one to, Tokyo Disney opened under his leadership. So that's basically what he did. He was responsible for opening Tokyo Disney. Not that big of a deal, honestly. And then you have Don Tatum, who probably was the real CEO of that time. And he was the CEO of Disney until 71 through 1980. He helped with Walt Disney World Resort, Epcot, and planted the seeds of Tokyo Disney. Otherwise, he did not really shake up the company very much. He was one of these people like, how would Walt do it? Let's do it the way Walt did it. As a result, the company did not really grow or expand. Disney was basically stuck during his tenure as CEO. But now, let's get to the two truly terrible CEOs. And the second worst CEO at Disney was Bob Chapek. And here's the thing. In some ways, I feel a little bad for Bob Chapek because he inherited the Disney company at the height of COVID. And that is not an ideal situation to be put in. But I do think COVID actually exposed Chapek for who he was, and it accelerated his term as a CEO. Basically, I can't think of really too many good things Bob Chapek did. Like, his whole thing was when he took over, parks had to be shut down, theatrical shut down, all that jazz. But that's not necessarily his fault. And he was just trying to survive. But basically, what he decided to do was he used this opportunity to completely take away the Fast Pass system and replace it with Genie Plus. A plan I want to know had started under Iger, but Chapek pulled the trigger and pushed it through. Chapek also decided to bet everything, and I mean everything, on Disney Plus. Basically, subscribers were the way to go. Making money at the box office wasn't. And while I can understand a couple of those movies not being put in theaters, because are you really going to sit on Artemis Fowl and pay the interest loans for that to become theatrical at some point when you can just put it onto Disney Plus, say, hey, we got a new movie up, and get people to subscribe and watch it? I don't blame him for things like that. But he did want to use this as a chance to, well, shorten the theatrical window. Like, hey, movies aren't going to be in theaters for 90 days. They're going to be on theaters on 45 days. And then they're going to be available on Disney Plus. And under his leadership, a lot of the physical media divisions got cut down or eliminated, which means we have seen fewer physical releases of Disney movies. Also, he decided to experiment with that Disney Premier Access, where for $30, you could unlock movies like Mulan and The Jungle Cruise and Raya and the Last Dragon and watch them on Disney Plus, so long as you continue to pay for a Disney Plus subscription. And he was a spreadsheet guy. He had no creative bone in his body. All he did was lay people off and cut positions. Maybe he had a vision, but I really can't think of too many good things he did personally. Yeah, I am not surprised that he was let go. I am not surprised that they brought Bob Iger back. And by the way, that's another good thing about Bob Iger. Now, Chapek proved that because the streaming thing was just so unprofitable, Iger has recommitted to theatrical and physical media. Like, keep in mind, under Bob Chapek, Pixar movies went straight to Disney Plus. Luca, Turning Red, Soul. And a lot of the Disney fans point out that, yeah, Pixar's weakened position in the theatrical world, that's because of Bob Chapek. I think all three of those movies would have been at least minor hits, but they went to Disney Plus for free. That was what Bob Chapek did. If Pixar goes away, let's make it absolutely clear, they will not go away. Pixar's future is secure. But Pixar's weakening position in the theatrical landscape is because Bob Chapek trained people to go to Disney Plus rather than to theaters. And by the way, they did this for their own movies too. Like Encanto was only in theaters for 30 days because get it on Disney Plus. Get it on Disney Plus. That's where it became a hit. They didn't really make any money on it that way, but what the heck? People watched it, right? So I think for cheapening the theatrical experience and Disney's own bottom line, compromising it, Bob Chapek is pretty much close to the worst. But if he's not the worst, hold on. One comment here. Another thing that was stupid about Bob Chapek is the fact that they had to make a stupid decision putting both Luca and Turning Red, both Pixar movies, on Disney Plus. That was a dumb move. I will sip to that. I need to fill that up. Oh, well, we're almost done here. But here's the thing. If Bob Chapek is not the worst Disney CEO, who is the worst Disney CEO? And it really pains me to say this one because I wish this was not the case. I really wish this was not the case. But it's Ron Miller. Here's the thing. Ron Miller was the husband of Diane Disney Miller. He was the son-in-law of Walt Disney. And let's dispel a common myth right now. Ron Miller is not a Nepo baby. And for those who don't know what a Nepo baby is, it's basically someone who was born into a rich family, a famous family, or married into one. And they basically got some privileges and opportunities that most people would not have gotten because they were born into the family. That is not Ron Miller. He actually was a military man. He had skills. He worked his way up in the company, started with television, moved up. In many ways, Ron Miller should have been a great Disney CEO. And the sad thing is, by all accounts, he almost seemed like he would be a natural. He was good with people. He was very well liked. What he did not apparently possess was great business skills. He probably wasn't that cunning. He might have been a little too nice, in fact. There's that famous video of Don Hahn and John Lasseter walking around the Disney studios making a home video. And Ron Miller came out and they actually thought that they were like fired because they weren't supposed to be filming. And he gave them permission to film it as long as they didn't. I don't know. There was no internet back then, but, as long as it didn't get out. But now it's out and it's a great little thing. So, thank you, Ron, for letting that go through. But he was basically too nice. And he did do some things that were noteworthy. He was the one who founded Touchstone. He also realized that cable TV was becoming a thing. So Disney Channel. The Disney Channel was launched under Ron Miller. And he did acquire the book movie rights to Who Framed Roger Rabbit. It didn't get made until Eisner came around, but he did acquire it. He saw the potential there. So I don't want to act like he did nothing. Ron Miller definitely could have been a great Disney CEO. So you might be asking now, why is he the worst when you have like Don Tatum and Card Walker, who basically were CEOs in name only? They didn't really do much. Well, here's the thing. Ron Miller decided that he wanted to stick to Walt's plan, a new animated movie every 4 years. And he was afraid to shake up the company that much. He basically wanted to focus on the things that had already been created by his father-in-law rather than focus on new things. And this is where Roy E. Disney, nephew of Walt Disney, took particular issue with Ron Miller. Because Roy Disney pointed out that if you were not creating new stuff and you were not expanding, then what you were basically doing was running a museum. Miller did not want to invest in new theme park rides, except for one. He was in early negotiations to bring a Star Wars simulator to the Disney theme parks. When George Lucas at first said he wanted to put it in malls, Miller said that technology was too good for malls. Why don't you bring it to Disneyland? He did not close the deal, but that attraction eventually became Star Tours. So Yeah, he was at least a little creative, but otherwise he was not investing in the parks. The animation division was producing mediocre film after mediocre film. And look, you can like things like Fox and the Hound, you can like the Aristocats, you can like the Rescuers, but there is no doubt that those are far inferior films compared to The Jungle Book and Sleeping Beauty and Fantasia. They're pretty weak in comparison. And here's the big thing. There was a investor, I forget what the term was. I think it's here. Corporate raider. He was a corporate raider. And a corporate raider is someone who basically starts buying stock in the company with the intention to eventually acquire a majority stake to acquire the company and then sell it off for parts. And now here's the good thing about that. You can normally see when it's happening and you can do something about it, but basically Ron Miller did not take this corporate raider seriously and came dangerously close to having the Disney company taken over by the corporate raider. The Disney company had to pay a lot of money to buy the corporate raider stock back. And then once that happened, and once other corporate raiders saw that the Disney company's reaction to this was to basically not do anything until they had to give a payoff, other corporate raiders started buying stock in Disney. And Ron Miller never took the threat seriously, it appears. And so under his leadership, Disney as a company almost did not exist. This is what I ask people on Twitter when they talk about the worst CEO of all time. Would you rather have a Disney company that focuses on Star Wars and Marvel and still releases Pixar and Disney animated films? Or would you rather have no Disney at all? Would you rather Disney have ended in the mid-'80s? And then there is no Who Framed Roger Rabbit. There is no California Adventure. There's no Beauty and the Beast. There's no Lion King. There's no ABC, or at least, well, ABC is a company, but there's no Disney, ABC Family or Disney Channel. Like, is that what you wanted, for there to be just no Disney whatsoever? For, Disneyland to basically have been shut down and the land sold? Because under Ron Miller, this is exactly what was going to happen. And thanks to Roy Disney and Stanley Gold ousting him in favor of Michael Eisner, the Disney company was saved. So here's my final thoughts on this. My job here is not to convince you to like CEOs like Bob Iger and Michael Eisner or Roy Disney. It's not even here to make you hate CEOs like Ron Miller and Bob Chapek or Don Tatum. Frankly, people have different reasons for liking or disliking CEOs. For a lot of people, Bob Iger's focused on Star Wars and Marvel. That's a big problem for them. And even though he did a lot of great things, like bringing back 2D animation and, bringing Pixar into the family and reinvesting in theme parks, you know what? They just don't like Star Wars, Marvel, or they don't like the fact that he fired Dick Cook. And so he is the worst of all time. Or some people think that Bob Iger's the best because he expanded the company and all that jazz. I'm using Bob Iger just because he's the current CEO. But at the end of the day, it's like, look, you got to take a look at a big, big picture here. All the CEOs, with maybe the exception of Roy Disney, all had their pros and all had their cons. Even though I put Michael Eisner as the second best CEO of the company, the end of his tenure was a disaster. And Disney was basically in almost no better position than they were when he first took over the company. And, you have to kind of look at things as a whole. But Eisner did basically help revitalize Disney feature animation. You also have to keep in mind these CEOs everything that happens is not like something personally done by these CEOs. I mean, the Genie Plus thing, I can guarantee you there were people who worked in the theme park divisions that came up with that, and Iger and Chapek executed it. They get the credit, but it's not like they were there sitting in the rooms deciding how this was going to work. So you have to keep that in mind as well. When Iger fired Dick Cook, I don't think he was personally thinking, I don't care about Disney's legacy. I want to cancel the Walt Disney Treasures line. That wasn't his thought. He just wanted to bring in his own executives. It really was that. And those executives did have other priorities. And, I kind of agree with that, because here's something that always gets overlooked. Whenever we're talking about new Disney and old Disney, I find myself being torn between two worlds, people who like legacy Disney and people who like modern Disney. I don't know why we can't like both, as if both do not have good things to like about the company. But if you ever want the strongest case for why you should not be too terribly focused on the past, and you should not immediately write off everything that Disney does in the future, heed the words of Walt Disney. Walt Disney himself said, around here, we don't look back very often. We're always looking towards the future, towards new opportunities. We keep moving forward. And for the record, Walt Disney would have loved Rise of the Resistance and Race to Pandora. He would have absolutely loved it. And by the way, it's not even like the classic rides have remained untouched all these years later. I finally went on Peter Pan a few weeks ago after not having gone on it for like 10 years. And here's the thing. I have a pretty good memory. Even though the layout's the same, so much of that ride is different now. They have updated it to a great extent. It's not the same ride it was when Disneyland first opened. So just putting it out there. So anyway, those are the best and worst Disney CEOs since the beginning of the company. I would like to know what you think about them. What are your reasons for liking or disliking CEOs? I'd love to know. Comment below. Like, favorite, share, subscribe. And as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.